What a week we had in week 10. Game after game being decided by a last second field goal. I believe there were 6 of them. Games going down to the wire. We have good matchups in week 11, including a rematch of the Super Bowl, but I think it's going to be difficult for week 11 to top what we saw in week 10. Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with my week 11 NFL predictions. I went 10-4 last week, and those 4 losses, they were games that were decided by a last second field goal. I am 101-49 on the season so far after 10 weeks, which I am happy with. Let's hope I can keep this momentum going. Let's get to the week 11 NFL predictions. Bengals and Ravens to start off the week. Thursday night football. Both teams looking to bounce back after losing last week at the very end on a game-winning field goal. The Bengals will likely be without T. Higgins for this matchup. Also, the Bengals will likely be without Trey Hendrickson. And those are 2 big pieces for this Bengals team. And they go on the road to take on a Ravens team. I will say, before last week, I felt like these were 2 of the hottest teams in the NFL as they were starting to get on a roll. The Bengals especially, after the slow start to the season. But I just think we're going to see both quarterbacks. I think it's going to be one of the best Thursday night games of the season. And I do think it will live up to the hype. I think that we're going to see a high-scoring game. And I think it's very difficult to believe as we haven't seen a lot of points in primetime games throughout most of the season. But I think we're going to see this game get into the 30s, believe it or not. And I think at the end, the Ravens walk away with the victory. The Bengals lose 2 in a row. They are on a losing streak again at this point by losing to the Ravens. In a tight game, I like the Ravens. Steelers and Browns, another AFC North matchup. The Steelers, a win last week over the Packers. The Browns, an emotional victory over the Ravens. The Browns have the best defense in the league from a stat standpoint, while the Steelers, I have been expressing this for about the last year or so. The Steelers defense is fairly inconsistent, a lot like the Seahawks defense. One week they can look like a top 5 defense in the league, then the next week they could be a bottom tier defense in the league. It depends on which Steelers defense shows up, determines if they win the game or not. But in this scenario, I just think the Browns are a much better team in this matchup, despite both teams being 6-3 coming into this game. I believe the Steelers have been outgained in almost every single game this season, if not every one. But somehow they are still 6-3. And that just goes to show how good of a coach Mike Tomlin is. But in this game, the Browns, they have the hot hand. Deshaun Watson is playing with confidence in these last couple of weeks, and I like the Browns. We have got the Bears and the Lions, and I do tend to acknowledge that teams that play on Thursday the week before, they have the advantage of rest, which is true for the Bears. By playing on Thursday night, they do have the rest factor in their favor. Plus the Lions, they're coming off of an emotional victory on the road against the Chargers with the game-winning field goal. But this is one of those circumstances where playing on Thursday last week and having that rest factor is not going to play into the Bears' favor. It feels like a waiting game at this point to see if Justin Fields will play in this game or not, as he is still being considered day to day. So if it's going to be Tyson Bagent, I do anticipate the Lions to win this very convincingly. I expect the Lions to win by at least double digits, and Vegas thinks the same. I think the Lions, they win this game with ease, especially if we see Tyson Bagent under center once again for the Bears. We saw David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs have a day against the Chargers' run defense. And I think they're going to continue asserting the ground game throughout the rest of the season with Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Lions win very handily in this. Chargers and Packers. The Packers lost again last week to the Steelers on the road. They are back home in Lambeau, taking on a Chargers team that once again lost in a one-possession game. But I do think the Chargers bounce back this week, as Jordan Love has struggled since the first 3 weeks of the season. And I talked about it last week, how I really want to see Jordan Love succeed and prove the naysayers wrong, and it's frustrating to see him struggle. I do think the one thing that could play into the Packers' favor is the running game of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Aaron Jones is starting to get back into the mix in the Packers' running game. We saw the Chargers defense give up a lot of yards to David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs last week. I do think the running game for the Packers could be the equalizer in this matchup. But in the end, though, I just think the Chargers, they finally win a one-possession game. I do think the Packers' running game keeps them in it. And the Packers' defense, they have their moments where they look like an elite defense. They have playmakers on defense. But I just think the Chargers finally get a one-possession victory in their favor for once. We'll see how Jordan Love plays these next couple of weeks to see if he truly is the Packers QB of the future, which I am rooting for him, and it is frustrating me to see him struggle, but I think the Packers lose again this week. Raiders and Dolphins. The Raiders are 2-0 under interim head coach Antonio Pierce. And I want to say, Antonio Pierce needs to be the permanent Raiders head coach. I like his approach to the game. This may be a hot take here, but his approach to the game reminds me a lot of Dan Campbell. And look at how the Lions are doing this season. The Lions, they are in the works for having a very special season under Dan Campbell. And I think a big mistake the Raiders made was hiring Josh McDaniels, knowing about his tenure with the Broncos and how that ended. It set the franchise back a little bit. But it's better late than never to make changes. And they did that a couple weeks ago. And the Raiders look like a much different team than what we saw earlier in the year. Davante Adams is happier. Davante Adams is getting the ball. Antonio Pierce has expressed that he wants to make it a focal point for the team to get the ball to Davante Adams because he is one of the best receivers in the league. They go on the road to take on the Dolphins. They are coming off of their bye week. And I think the difference in this game is the Dolphins coming off of their bye week. I do think with how they played the Chiefs, they fell behind early 21-0. But their defense, they gave them opportunities to win that game. But the offense couldn't capitalize. And I think with the bye week, with them being back home, I think the Dolphins win. But I think this could be a sneaky cover for the Raiders. With the way Antonio Pierce has been approaching the game these last couple weeks, I think the Raiders, they could cover from this one, but I anticipate the Dolphins winning this one. But I still think no matter what happens the rest of the year for the Raiders, Antonio Pierce needs to be the permanent head coach. Giants and Commanders. We saw these two face off earlier in the season. I believe it was in week 7. And the Giants won by a score of 14-7. And I remember saying the Giants would win that day with how their defense had been playing in the games leading up to that. Now, the Commanders look like the stronger team in this matchup. Sam Howell has had the hot hand recently. He is leading the NFL in passing yards. Now the Giants are being led by Tommy DeVito, the third-string quarterback. A third-string quarterback going up against a starting quarterback that has had the hot hand, leading the league in passing yards. I'm going with the Commanders to win this one pretty handily. The Commanders' defense hasn't been strong throughout the season, but I do think this is going to be a week where they establish some momentum going forward, setting up the Thanksgiving Day showdown against the Cowboys on the road. So the Commanders, they pick up a confidence booster going into Dallas for Thanksgiving. Speaking of Dallas, Cowboys and Panthers. This game feels simple, but I don't know if it necessarily does. And I don't think anyone is going to believe me on this. I at least would like you to hear me out on this. The Cowboys are coming off of a dominant win over the Giants, while the Panthers, they did play on Thursday night, but that is besides the point. Dak Prescott has been playing well in these last few weeks. CeeDee Lamb in these last few games. He has been asserting himself as a top 10 receiver in the NFL. But at least once a season, there is a game where the Cowboys play against an opponent that they are significantly better than, and they do not look good in that game. They look completely flat. We saw it last year against the Texans. They played the Texans close. We saw it in 2021 against the Broncos, where the Broncos, they completely outplayed them. They were dominant that day. And I think that could be the case for this game. I think the Cowboys win it, but I think it's going to be like the game we saw between the Panthers and the Dolphins, where the Panthers went up 14-0 early, and it took the Dolphins some time to wake up in that game. But the Dolphins, they won that game convincingly. I do think the Cowboys, they start slow in this game, but the Cowboys do enough to win the game. Next up, we have the Titans and the comment section's favorite team, the Jaguars. And the Jaguars, they looked abysmal last week against the 49ers, while the Titans, they looked abysmal on the road against the Buccaneers. And I know exactly how to pick this game. The same way that I picked it last week, where I talked about how the Titans are the most inconsistent team in the NFL because I have no idea which Titans team shows up. Because we have seen positive moments for the Titans this season, and we've seen negative moments. And it's a question that I always ask myself, which Titans team do I think shows up to the game on Sunday? And I think it's going to be the Titans team that cannot win on the road, as they are now 0-5 on the road this season, losing last week, and I think they go 0-6. As you know, the Jaguars are going to be playing with a chip on their shoulder in this game, as they were embarrassed last week, and I think the Jaguars, they turn it around, and they win this game pretty handily. But if the Titans were going to win this game, Derrick Henry has to have 25 to 30 carries in this game. As Derrick Henry, he does historically do well in division matchups. But I still think the Jaguars, they win this game. But if the Titans win this game, I do think it will be the result of Derrick Henry having at least 25, 30 carries. Cardinals and Texans, both teams with wins last week. Kyler Murray made his season debut for the Cardinals last week, James Conner came back from the IR. The Cardinals are getting their key playmakers back into the offense. And the Texans, C.J. Stroud, another great game. Easily the rookie of the year right now. He has had a phenomenal season so far, especially in the last two games. I anticipate that this game is going to be high scoring. Whatever the over-under is for this game, definitely take the over. Because I think this game is going to take 31 points at least to win this game. I think with both offenses, they are getting better. In the Cardinals' case, they are getting healthier. They're getting back into the thick of things. I like the quarterback play in this matchup, but I've got to go with the quarterback that has the hot hand right now, and that is C.J. Stroud. But expect a high-scoring game in this game. I think both teams can easily get to 30 in this game. But I am going with the hot hand right now in the Texans. 2 come from behind wins. Or should I say, wins in the final seconds for the Texans in these last 2 weeks. Texans get another victory. Buccaneers and 49ers. The Buccaneers, a win last week against the Titans. 49ers, a dominant win on the road against the Jaguars. And they ended their 3-game losing streak. And I do think that there were some overreactions to the 49ers 3-game losing streak. And they were questioning if Brock Purdy was overrated. And I do understand why people would feel if Brock Purdy is overrated in their opinion. I completely understand that. But they traded for Chase Young going into the bye week at the trade deadline. And they come out against the Jaguars and are dominant from start to finish. I think that move, getting Chase Young, I do think that's going to be a season-defining moment for the 49ers the further along we get into the season. As now you have Chase Young and Nick Bosa completely chasing down quarterbacks. And I think the 49ers, they dominate again this week. They have that momentum being dominant last week. I did talk about how going into the matchup last week, coming off of that bye week, I felt like it was the best time for them to have the bye week with them having 3 straight losses. They're back in the win column, and I think they continue starting to win games again. I think they win this pretty easily. Jets and Bills. In my opinion, this is a must-win for the Bills. They need to get a win to get confidence going down the stretch, as they have the 3rd toughest schedule remaining out of everyone in the league. If there was a team that could overcome this kind of adversity, it is the Bills. A big reason why the Bills lost against the Jets in week 1 was because of the turnovers. The exact same reason why they lost this week to the Broncos. It was turnovers that did them in. If the Bills can just simply not turn the ball over, they will win this game. As turnovers were the difference in week 1, it'll be the difference this week in this matchup. We know how good the Jets defense is, but there is occasionally some moments where the Jets defense, they don't look like the elite defense that we all talk about. Week 2 against the Cowboys, that was the worst game the Jets had defensively this season. And I do think the Bills overcome adversity, as a lot of people right now are probably counting them out. They're talking about how Josh Allen isn't elite, Josh Allen is overrated, the Bills should consider firing Sean McDermott. The Bills overcome this adversity, and in a must-win game, they win against the Jets, avenging their week 1 loss. The Bills play clean football. They don't turn the ball over. They are more disciplined this week. They win against the Jets. Seahawks and Rams, these two faced off in week 1, and the Rams picked up a convincing win that day, and that was the Seahawks' second worst performance of the season so far after 10 weeks of the season, with the worst being to the Ravens. And now the Rams are adding in Cooper Kupp to the mix, as he got activated off the IR in week 5. And Cooper Kupp, he is due for a bounce back game. He has not put up productive numbers in the last 3 games, but the targets are still there for Cooper Kupp. And with Matthew Stafford expected to be good to go in this matchup, I think if Matthew Stafford plays, I think the Rams, I think they handle business and pull off the upset. Because right now, it's a pick'em to some, but the last I checked, the Seahawks are a 1-point favorite in this matchup. The Rams, they did recently sign Carson Wentz. And I think a lot of people have forgotten about it. I think maybe people don't remember because the Rams are coming off of their bye week. And I think the Rams, they win this game. They pull off the upset. I think Cooper Kupp, he finally gets back to that dominance that we were used to seeing in the past 2 seasons. Vikings Broncos, Sunday Night Football, a matchup of 2 teams that have been relentless this season. Both teams that did not start off great, but they've been relentless. The Broncos giving up 70 points to the Dolphins in week 3. With the way they've been playing recently, especially on defense, you wouldn't think they gave up 70 points to the Dolphins. Their defense has been holding their own. The Broncos have been holding their own against the Chiefs twice and against the Bills this past week. Their defense has been forcing turnovers. The Vikings, they did not start off great at all. They started off 0-3. They lost Justin Jefferson to the IR with a hamstring injury. Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles, out for the season. They traded for Cam Akers earlier in the year, but he tore his Achilles, out for the season. The Vikings traded for Joshua Dobbs at the trade deadline. And in the last game and a half, Joshua Dobbs has been playing phenomenal with the Vikings. But Joshua Dobbs has been playing phenomenal football all season long. And in a matchup of teams that have been relentless, despite not starting off great, I think it's very fitting this game goes down to the wire. And that's what I'm anticipating. I am going to go with the Vikings. I know that Russell Wilson has been playing good this season. He's been putting up great numbers. But I just got to go with the hot hand in the Vikings. I think the Vikings, if they can just play clean football, then I think they'll win this game. The Broncos have been winning games with forcing turnovers. The Vikings keep the ball clean. I think they win. Wrapping up week 11 with Monday Night Football, Eagles, Chiefs, a rematch of the Super Bowl, the game that everyone has been looking forward to. And this game will, without a doubt, live up to the hype. Primetime games, they have really tended towards not being very high scoring, but expect a high scoring game in this one, as it would be a very much of a disappointment if this isn't a high scoring game. Last time we saw these two against each other, a 38-35 thriller in the Super Bowl. Both teams coming off of their bye week. They have had 2 weeks to prepare for this matchup, just like in the Super Bowl, having 2 weeks to get ready. The way I see this game, the Eagles will be playing with a chip on their shoulder, knowing that they're playing the team that ended their season in heartbreaking fashion, in a game that was really controversial with the controversial holding call on James Bradbury that set up the game-winning field goal for the Chiefs. But both teams are a lot different now than in February. The Eagles, they've gotten better players on defense, but the numbers they haven't shown. The Chiefs defense is young and inexperienced, but they are still one of the best in the league. In a high-scoring game, I think this game will simply come down to which team has the ball last. And this game is a coin flip to me. But if I had to guess who has the ball last in this game, it's going to be the Eagles. I'm going with the Eagles to win this Super Bowl rematch. They're going to play the chip on their shoulder. They're going to be really angry. The Chiefs, in their last couple of games, they have not done well on offense, while the Eagles, they have done well on offense in their last couple of games. I got to go with the better offense right now, and that is the Eagles. And that will do it for my Week 11 NFL predictions. Comment your picks down below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the football this weekend. It's going to be a good one.